To draft your basic trouser pattern, we need your measurements. You need the length of the trouser, the waist, the waist to the hip line, and so forth. So I'm going to be teaching us how to draft a basic trouser pattern, and the trouser pattern can be altered to fit in any type of trouser you want to make. So let's go ahead and do it. To do that, first we are going to mark 3 inches inwards from here. I'm going to mark 3 inches here, rule it, and then I will mark 2 inches downwards from the top. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark this. Now I'm going to be marking out my hip measurements to get the hip line. And to do that, you divide your hip into 4, and my hip is 42, so 42 into 4 will give me 10.5. So I'm going to mark out 10.5 and use it to create a square, a complete square. Okay, now we're going to introduce our dart. So for my dart measurement, I choose to use my bust pan, and the bust pan is your nipple to nipple measurement. Mine is 8, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I'm just going to use the 4 as the dart measurement. And the depth of my dart, I'm using 4.5. So I'm just going to mark the 4.5 here, and then connect this line. So for the dart, I'm using 1 inch, which is half each of both sides. So here. So now we're going to mark out our waist measurement. My waist is 28 inches. 28 divided by 4 is 7 inches. And we'll add this 1 inch for the dart, which will give us 8 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark 8 inches here. Now to rule out this line, you have to also mark your waist to hip line. So my waist to hip line, you have to measure it. Your waist to hip line, my waist to hip line is 8 inches. So I'm just going to mark the waist to hip line 8 inches. Rule it. So this is our hip line, and this is waist to hip line. Okay. So to connect this your waist measurement to the waist to hip line, you are going to come up on this side by half an inch. So I'm just making a dot for where the half an inch is, and I'm going to connect this line up to the half an inch. Okay, now I can draw this half an inch I took up to the first dart line. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is introduce our crotch measurements. Now to get your crotch measurements and the crotch depth, what you work with your hip measurement is already your crotch depth. Now to get the crotch measurement, what you're going to do is mark out your hip divided by for the front we use hip divided by 20, and for the back we use hip divided by 10. So my hip 42 divided by 20 will give me 2.1. So I'm just going to mark 2.1 here, and then extend this hip line to the 2.1. And then I will come up to the waist to hip line, and I will mark 0.25. That is half of half an inch. Mark it here, and then use my ruler, my hip ruler, to connect this line. So I'm going to connect the line like so. Now this is your crotch for the front. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is now mark out the lap measurement, the knee measurement, and up to the round the ankle measurement. So to get that, first you have to divide this place into 2. So I can just fold my tape in half to get this place, and what I'm getting here is 6.25. So I'm just going to mark 6.25 all the way to the end of the line. For the knee line, you can measure your knee line from your waist to your knee to get your knee line, or you can choose to divide it by the half of the measurement. Now the full measurement I am working with is the length of my trouser is length 38 inches. So this is my pattern is not long enough to get to the full length of my trouser. The full length of my trouser is from my waist to my ankle is 38. Okay, let me just extend the full length, then I can get the 38 complete. Okay, I've added an extension. I added another pattern paper to the length, the full length, to extend it. So now we can mark as the full length of the trouser. So the full length of my trouser is 38. So I'm going to measure 38 from the waistline. This is 38. I'm going to mark 38 all the way. Okay, so I'm going to cut it out. Now we have the full length of the trouser. So to get the knee line now, I'm just going to measure from this hip line to the end of the trouser, and I will divide it in half to get the knee line. So this, I'm just going to fold my tape. It's a bad habit, but I'm used to it. Fold my tape in half, and this is the knee line. So I'm going to be using here as a knee line. So I'm just going to measure it from the waistline. I'm seeing this is 14. So I'm going to mark this 14 all the way. Okay. So I can also extend this 3 inches line we marked on the side to the end of this new length. Okay. Now I can introduce my knee measurement and my ankle measurement. Okay, my knee measurement is 17. So I'm just going to divide this 17 into 2 to get the measurement I'm going to input here. So 17 divided by 2 is 8.5. Now this 8.5, I'm supposed to spread it between here and here. And to do that, I will divide the 8.5 again into 2. So 8.5 divided by 2 will now give me 4.25. So from this middle, I'm just going to find the 4.25 and mark it on both sides. So I can mark it on the down part as well, 4.25. Now I will just connect these lines from the knee to the ankle line. Okay, now for this other part, to connect this line to this line, I just use my straight ruler. I just mark it from the knee to the hip line. And then for the front, for the middle part, what I do is you reverse your ruler in half like so and use this part to mark it. You are going to do this in a way that is not going to be too curved, but it will come out looking a bit curved. Okay? Practice makes you better, so do well to practice more than once if you have to. Okay, so I have the basic measurements for the front. This is the basic trouser measurement. This is the front measurement. Now we are going to draft the back. Now the trick here is for us to draft the back, we have to repeat the same thing we have done for the front at the back. Now this is because we are going to be the front piece is going to be altered to get the back. So I'm going to bring out another pattern paper and I'm going to repeat this same thing we've done here at this other pattern paper to get the back pattern. Okay, so let's get to it. Just like we extended the length of the front piece, we're also going to extend the length of this one by adding extra paper so it will get to 38 inches. So I'm going to mark out the 2 inches and 3 inches the way we did it for the first one. I'm going to just mark out the 2 inches and the 3 inches as we have done in the first one, and then we'll continue. We are repeating the exact same things we did for the front piece pattern. So I'm marking out the 10.5 inches for the hip line as we did for the front. Okay, then we'll mark out our waist to hip line, 8 inches. So that's for the front. The same thing we have done, we're just going to repeat it. Marking out the dart like we did in the front, and then taking out the waist measurement, extending it by the 1/2 inch upwards. Now this is the hip line we have to extend. Now we're marking out the length of the trouser, and from there we can now mark out our knee line from the hip line, which is also our crotch line, and then we can now extend it and then mark out our knee measurements and the ankle measurements, using our ruler to connect from the knee to the ankle and from the knee to the hip line. So we have just repeated the exact thing we did for the front pattern. We have repeated it for the back pattern. Now we are going to change the pen and start our alteration to get this to be the back pattern. I'm going to use the red marker to start my alteration. Now first of all, what we're going to do is from this hip line, from this marking of the hip line, as you can see. Now for hips 38 and above, you can use 1 inch. If it's someone of say hip 34, 35, maybe stopping at 36, you can use 0.75 inch. So for hip 38 and above, you can use 1 inch is here. So me, I am 42, so I can use 1 inch. So I'm going to come in here. So I'm going to come in from this line. I will go in by 1 inch, and then come to the waistline and I will mark 2 inches. So I'm going to connect these two lines with a straight rule, and I'll mark it all the way to the end of this thing. Okay. Now from here, you are going to measure your waist measurement. Now our waist measurement is 8 inches when you add the 1 inch for that. So I'm going to just measure. First of all, you come up on the top like this. At this top here, you come up. Now for someone who is very who has big bum, someone who their hip is big, their bum is big, you can use up to 2 inches to increase the back of their trouser so that it will accommodate the big bum. Now someone like me that is well endowed, I can use 2 inches or 1.8 or 1.5. Now someone who is not that their hip is not that big, their bum is not that big, you can use up to 1 inch or 1.5. So I'm just going to use like 1.8 for me. So from here I will measure my 8 inches. Now you are aiming at this line here, okay, that same line. So 8 inches, and from there you can come up from this line here. You can come up by 1/2 inch. Remember you came up by 1/2 inch when you are cutting the front part. So 1/2 inch. So from here I'm just going to measure my 8 inches. So this is my 8 inches here. I am going to extend this waistline to the end, to the 3 inches allowance at the back, at the side. So I'm just going to extend this line here, extend this one here. Now I'm using the red marker so that you will know where the back alteration started. Okay, now I'm going to connect these two lines from here to here, for this is our new waistline. All right, so now that we've marked out this, to connect this place to the hip line, what you have to measure out is your you will measure your hip. Now note that from here we have created a new line for the back piece. So from here I'm going to measure my 10.5, which is my hip measurement. My hip divided by 4, I'm going to measure 10.5 here. Now remember that we left 3 inches on this side when we are marking. So I'm just going to measure from this place what is left from that place. I have 1.8 here. I'm just going to come up to this line here, this other waist to the hip line, and I mark that 1.8 as well. I will now connect these 2 lines. Okay, now from there I can now measure out my waist. From there I will just connect my waist to my waist up to that 1.5 inch extension. Now this is our new measurement, so you can see like this. Okay, now the next thing we are going to do is to curve the back crotch like we did to the top. If you come back here again, remember for the front I told you the front we divide our hip by 20, but for the back we'll divide our hip by 10. So my hip 42 divided by 10 will give me 4.2. So from this new hip line where the red mark is, that's why I'm using the red marker, so that you will know exactly where the back starts. I will just mark from here. I will extend this line to that 4.2 I have here. So 4.2 here. I'm just going to rule this line to get to the 4.2. Don't add any extra, just do it exactly the way you are seeing it, like this. That if when you do it like that, you will see how comfortable this dress is going to be on your body. Now from this waistline, the waist to the hip line, I'm going to come out again just like I did in the front part by 0.25. that is half of half an inch, and then use my ruler to connect these 2. Now this is it. This is our new crotch measurement. This is the new crotch. You just have to take this thing exactly the way we're marking it, and you get it accurately. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is extend these our markings to the down part. So what you're going to do is from the knee line, you just come out by half an inch. So you're marking out half an inch on both sides, half an inch. Do the same thing at the ankle line, half an inch. And then use your ruler to connect all these lines. So for the straight lines, you just do a straight line. Okay, now you can just use your hand and just smoothing these places, or use this curved part to just arrange it so it doesn't look pointy. We don't do pointy lines. Your body is not pointed, it's a bit curved. So just smoothing out the line. Okay, now this is it. Then for this middle part, just like we did in the front pattern, you're just going to use the ruler in reverse like this and connect these 2 lines together. I'm just shading this pen because the pen is not writing out well. Okay, if you can look at this now, if you are seeing the red markings, this is our back pattern. Okay, now one thing that is left is our dart. So I'm going to do the dart now. To do the dart, you just the same. Since you are using 4 inches for the dart, I'm just going to mark 4 inches from here to get my new dart for the back. So this is 4 inches, and the depth of the 4 inches for the depth of the back for the back dart is 5 inches. So I'm just going to indicate where 5 inch is just 1 dot, and then I'll use a straight line to mark it out. Now to get this, that's why you need a straight ruler. With this straight ruler now, I can mark out where this my 4 inches goes. Just place it on the straight line here. Place the base on the straight line, and to help direct you so that you will mark exactly a straight line. This is it. So I'm just going to mark this to get my dart, and then mark out your half an inch on both sides, since we are using half inch for the dart, this is it. Okay, this is our new back measurement. So I'm going to cut out this part, the patterns for both the front and the back. This is the back part, the front pattern, and this is the back pattern. So you are seeing the difference now. The red markings indicates where the front and the back is. So now I'm going to cut out this pattern so that we can start to alter it for our pockets and the zip flyer and the band. So I'm going to just cut out all of this and then we'll do that part. Okay. Now that we have finished drafting our trouser pattern, what we are going to do now is alteration of this trouser pattern. This is the back and this is the front. Looking so beautiful, and as you can see, it's like this. This is your my exact measurement, and when you are now going to sew, you can now add any allowance you want on the side. It will fit perfectly. Okay, basically now what we're going to do now is do our pattern alteration. For this pattern alteration now, we're going to be working on the zipper flyer, the pocket, and then the band. So first we're going to do the zipper flyer, because the zipper flyer needs us to do it before we remove the band. So for this, I'm going to be working on the front pattern. You can do this before you cut out the front pattern, but since I've already cut out the front pattern, I'm just going to improvise. So I'm going to put this underneath here. Put this. So I'm going to mark out the 2 inches here. Now for the zipper flyer, for the zip, you can decide to use between 6 inches to 7 inches. I find that 7 inches is better, because if you use 6 inches, you find it difficult to wear the trouser. So you can use 6 inches or 7 inches or even 7.5, depending on how large your hip is. So let's say I'm using 7.5. So I'm marking 7.5 here, and at this 7.5, I'm going to come out by 1.5 inch instead of 2 inches. Here I mark 2 inches, here I mark 1.5. So I'm going to connect the two of them with a straight line here. Okay, now from here, to have the pocket curve, I'm just to come in say by 1/2 inch and dot it. Now from this 1/2 inch, I will use my curved ruler to connect this place. Now this is our pocket bag. I'm just going to cut it out. So this is the pocket bag. This is kind of pocket bag you do that is part of the cutting. So I could have done this before cutting out the pattern, but since I didn't, now I am doing it. Sorry, this is how you alter your pattern to get your zipper flyer. Okay, now the next thing we're going to be altering is the band. To alter the band of the pocket for the front, this is what I'm going to do. I will fold in the dart like so. So I'm just going to hold the dart down with pins. So for the dart, you can decide how you want your dart to be. Now since you're taking out the dart from the trouser pattern, it will be, you can just use 1 inch or 1.5 inch. Then if you want the band to be larger, to be higher than that, you can now add to it after you've cut out the band. Okay, so to get that 1.5 inch I want, you start from the side, and you just mark your 1.5 inch. See how I'm marking it? You're going to mark it gradually like this until you get to the end. Now I can use a curved rule to connect it the same way I marked it, one after the other, from one dot to the other dot. Now this is not a straight line, so you're not going to mark it rule a straight line. Okay, now I can cut it out. Okay, to hold this permanently like this, I'm just going to use a tape to hold it down. So I'm using the tape to hold it down, and I can mark this So I'm going to indicate it with my pen. This is the front band, like so, and keep this piece. I'm going to repeat the same process for the back. Holding with that for the back. Okay, now we have the front and the back, and we have taken out the band. The next thing we are going to do is the pockets for the pockets and the pocket bag. So to get the pocket, how wide do you want your pocket to be so that your hand can freely go in? You can go on the safe route and just use 7. With 7 inch each, it can fit into your hand. Unless your hands are large, then you can go more than 7. So I'm going to just mark 7 here. Now the opening of the pockets, the opening of the pockets, you can come up here and mark 2 inches. You can use 1.5 or more than 1.5, depending on what you want. And then use your curved rule to just connect these two places. And then to get the pocket bag, you just come here, you come out, ignoring that, just mark your 3 inches from here. Come down here, mark 4 inches. This pocket fitting is not a standard, but if you use this method, it will just sit on your hip. It will not come down too low. So it works perfectly, unless you do not want that, in which case you can always walk around it. So I'm just going to mark it in like so. I'm going to come out like so before I curve it. So from here I can curve this line to meet this one. Unless you want the pocket to be bigger than this, but this is more than enough for a pocket. Now you can use your tracing wheel to trace this out into another pattern. Now say I decide to trace out my pattern here, so I'm going to just use this to get pockets. Okay, so I'm just going to rule this out. Trying to transfer my pocket bag here. And then from here, this is the pocket cover. Okay, so I'm going to trace this out and just cut it out. If you look at this place, you feel it here, it covers perfectly. Now I can use this to cover. This is like the pocket cover. Let me trace out the cover, the other part. Now this is my pocket bag. I'm just going to trace out the cover. So now this is your pocket cover and this is the pocket bag. Here it's completed. So these are the pieces for the trouser. Now we can say we are done drafting the trouser pattern. Now this right here is our basic trouser pattern with every part of it complete, and you can now use this to make your trousers in the future. Like you can always alter it whenever you want to make any trouser, be it flare, palazzo, bell button, anyone. Like you're just going to use this master pattern to alter it. So this is like our master pattern. So please, if this video was of any help to you, please do not forget to like and share, and see you in my next video. Bye.